Especially triggered. And this video is going to be on the state of America, um, maybe the state of pretty much all of the white nations, because I see a sort of common pattern, and it's really a white problem. I don't see this in many other countries like in Asia or Africa. I see this as really a European, North American problem, where uh, people in other countries are very nationalistic and have real pride in their culture and their heritage, and they will defend it. They will defend it to the death. They will give up anything just to maintain their culture, and they will fight the change um, with with their very lives. And there is something admirable about that, whereas in North America and in Europe, I don't see that. I don't see that same passion about the culture that makes them who they are. Um, and I kind of blame, like, the movements that have happened that have really lost sight of what it is that made the countries that they are in so great. Like if you look, I was having like a typical TYT battle that I mentioned in my previous video, where I went on to a TYT video and I said, uh, America is a white nation, and you can imagine the the YouTube backlash that I experienced was that oh it's not American, it's not a white nation, it's not, go back to your homeland. And and there was all these kind of comments like that it's founded by multiculturalism and blah blah blah, the typical arguments. And they basically called me a racist for saying that it's a white nation. And I want to explain what I meant by calling America a white nation. And I'm not even actually talking about the majority. I mean, as the majority fades, right now it's only 63% of America is white. I mean, the number has been fading pretty rapidly, and they predict that it's going to be like less than the majority in within the next 20 years. So that's the inevitable situation, that it's not going to be a white majority country, but I still call it a white nation. And the reason I explain that is that America was founded on European principles. The laws, the system of government, even the culture of the country, when people assimilate to it, is very European in its nature. And that has to be understood, that that is what made America. America is not just the people who form its borders, but the very system that created America. And it was created by only a handful of people. Like it was a small group of people, and they were white men. To be honest, they were white men. And those few men, they wrote the laws, they wrote um, the Constitution, and they were the ones that kind of came up with the concepts of the American dream. They came up with the concepts of liberty over government tyranny. And that was sort of the culture that created American culture. And, you can say, well, that American culture is pretty diverse in terms of the people that form it now. You have black people, you have people from a whole bunch of different nations that form the American culture. And what you'll see as it becomes less European, you'll see that the other groups want to have the system reflect their interests. And you will see that it's no longer this white nation that I described. It will become some hybrid of like multiculturalist nation. And I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, because a lot of these other cultures, and the reason people left those other cultures was they were flawed. They were majorly flawed. A lot of the systems that make America great were developed by Europeans. The concept of democracy is truly a European invention, back to the early Greeks. And it's something that was kind of developed over time through hardship of European wars, European experience, and also Europeans exploring other places and getting ideas from other countries. So there is a bit of mix there. I give that. Um, but making it a truly European thing. Um, One of the things that people don't realize is how influential British common law was in American law. A lot of the good things that came out of British law are reflected in American law. And what's happened is that we've sort of lost sight of all these great things that British European culture has really brought to America. And it makes me sad that the white people in America are just shells. They're they're not the same people who forged a nation. Like if you think about it, when the people that came to America in the first place, the first European settlers, they were people who were basically going to the moon. The travel from Europe to North America was as daunting as a man going from the Earth to the moon now. It was even longer. It was a long duration trip. It was a trip where like a good percentage of the people that made the trip died. Um, and that was, you had to be brave. You had to be like willing to risk it all in order to make that journey. And so the type of people that made that journey were these kind of go-getters that were really willing to take a risk for the American dream, to have something that that they could decide. They wanted liberty. They wanted to be able to practice the religion that they wanted to practice. They wanted to be able to be free. And a lot of them actually came over. The funny thing was, a lot of them that came over, part of the way that they paid for the voyage, because it was as expensive as going to the moon today in today's standards. A lot of them actually did what's called indentured servitude, which is basically they were slaves for 5 years. That's how it usually worked. That you would be a slave for 5 years, and there was always ways that they kind of made that extend even longer than 5 years. But but the point is, a lot of these people, they not only were willing to sacrifice their freedom uh, and life and whatever, but they ultimately saw that there'd be this potential that they'd be free and they'd be able to forge their own destiny. So these were people that were willing to sacrifice everything. And actually, a lot of people don't realize the whole idea of indentured servitude uh, was one of the things that led to slavery, which is kind of strange, because what happened was a lot of these indentured servants were treated so harshly that they actually sought mercy to get slaves instead of these indentured servants, because they were treating the slaves better than they would treat the indentured servants. Um, so a lot of history that gets lost. So whenever you hear black people say, "Oh, I was a son of a slave," or like slave from like 400 years ago, whatever. Well, a lot of the white people too were basically slaves, or even treated worse. It's kind of horrible, but it's all part of our history. So it is what it is. Like, um, but the point that I'm trying to make is that these people were willing to do anything, to sacrifice every last bit of themselves in order to, to realize this a major American dream. And that is, that's our ancestors. That's the people that made the country what it is. And it, I would wonder what they would say if they saw, these same people, their great great grandchildren, um, what they would think of those grandchildren, like what they would, wouldn't they be disappointed to see them groveling in the streets, to begging for forgiveness from other people that had the same experience? Um, it seems a little crazy to me that that the will of Americans has been lost, that they don't have that sense of the you know fight. That, I guess it's that's the only way to describe it, like a sense of fight, that they have to, like we're gonna struggle, we're gonna succeed, we're gonna do whatever it takes to become successful, to forge our own destiny. And there's sort of like that old expression where people say, good times breed weak men. And that's really what we're looking at now, is we have all these people who basically have never experienced hardship, and they have this weird guilt. It's, they always call it white guilt, and I actually do believe in white guilt, because you see the very obvious ramifications of it. They feel guilty to everyone else. They see poor black people or poor people in other countries, and they feel guilty for it. They say, well, I never had any hardship. My life was pretty easygoing. And they feel guilty, and they feel like that they must have done something wrong that makes them different than those other people. But they don't realize that they really didn't do anything wrong, and that the opportunities are there for anyone to take. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever color you are. The opportunities in America are excellent. That's why a lot of immigrants that come over, who are ambitious and just very similar to the early Americans, they come over and they become very successful. Doesn't matter what color they are, they become very successful because there's so many opportunities in America. And we got to stop with this feeling of guilt, and we got to move forward and regain some of that history of our ancestors, to say, hey, look, we built a great nation. Let's continue this greatness into the future. But if we can, if we constantly, live a life where we're demoralized, where we don't have the passion that drove our ancestors to this nation, to build, to really, if you think about it, they always say, oh, it's stolen land and blah, blah. I hate that whole concept of stolen land. Come on, who cares? Like, every land is stolen. Like, it's just read history. It's just like every little inch of this planet has been stolen from somebody or else, somebody or other at one point. So I don't care who stole the land. It's who owns the land right now. And if you don't defend that land, then you deserve to have it taken from you. And that's what's happening now. America's really, they're not defending their own territory anymore. They're basically conceding it. If in the past, if you had like hordes of people coming into your land, and you'd be like, well, no, I'm going to defend my borders. I'm going to protect what is mine. And, that was kind of seen as normal. Now it's like, let's help those people invade our land and take it over. And, that's, it's crazy to me. There's no reason that this should happen. There's no logical thing. Like, I actually had this really interesting conversation with a white woman, who was basically saying that, the numbers of people, it's inevitable that that Canada and the United States are just going to be taken over. They're going to become Muslim countries, or they're going to become like something non-white, and that's just inevitable. Because she said, well, there's so many people being born in other places that those people are just going to come over, and they're going to outbreed the white people living in America or Canada, and eventually it will be a non-white nation, majority. And now I'm speaking about the majority of people, um, and and she is totally wrong, because if you look at it in the past, we defended our borders. What's the point of even having a nation if you're willing to just give it up whenever somebody else says that they want to come in and take it over? You have to say, well, no, we don't have to let people in. They can breed as much as they want in their own nations. They can have as many children as they want, but they have to endure that. They have to like live with that decision that they've made, and they have to deal with the territory that they have. If they want to take our territory, we'll defend it. If that's the whole concept of the way land has been always managed in on this planet. That groups that become strong will take from groups that become weak. And right now we're seeing that. We're seeing that in America, that America has become weak. It's been demoralized, and it's basically conceding its territory. It's basically letting people invade it and take it over. And it's maybe not the bloody conflict that we experienced in the past, but it's still conflict, because what you're having the people that control the land at this moment in time as being they're being disenfranchised. They're being forced out of their comfort zones, I guess. They're forced out of the communities that they had built, and they really have been losing a battle, and the battle doesn't have to be lost. I just hope that people wake up and say, well, maybe you see all these riots and stuff that's going on, and you know I really see like three types of white people right now. One is the normie. Normie is like the the person that basically doesn't really know what's going on in the world. They listen to the news. They sort of kind of pay attention to it, but their head is really in the sand. They really don't care. They just want to work. They want to do the basics of life, and they don't really see what's happening around them. The whole world could be burning, and they'd be like, okay, well, I'll just do what I'm doing. Like they just don't pay attention to what's going on around them. And the majority is actually that group, where it's like these normies that don't really know what's going on. And then the second group is the Antifa type. And the Antifa type are possible, like they're the very left wing kind of radical people who basically hate themselves. They're generally white people. They hate themselves. They blame themselves. They've been indoctrinated by their university professors to be self-hating, loathing of themselves in every particular way. They see that they're colonizers, or whatever crazy term that they want to call themselves, and they are fighting. They have the fight, which is amazing. They do have the fight, but it's against themselves. They will fight against themselves. They will like rise up the black man, rise up the people of color, and they will do it in such a way that they destroy themselves. They will completely try to tear down everything that made their country what it is. And they're the worst. I really see them as the worst. They're the BLMs, the Antifa type, all these kind of white allies, they call themselves. And they are actually the vocal minority. They're they do represent a small group within the white community, and they are a very vocal group within the white community. Um, and then there's another group within the white community. The third group is the conservative that sort of laments the past, like sort of thinks about, oh, we were great. We had a nation. We had all these wonderful things. We had a good culture. We had all this stuff. And they understand what white culture is. They really appreciate the past, um, and they're vocal, but they're not militant. They're pretty passive, because conservatives are generally pretty passive creatures. Like they might believe in guns and whatever, but they generally are pretty passive. They just want to be left alone, and that's typical. Like it's typical conservative. Um, but there's no fight there. They will fight for their own family, and that's about it. It's very limited in terms of their desire to protect their whole nation. I do, there's a lot of conservatives that fit that bill, where they complain a lot. They'll do what I'm doing right now. I'm complaining a lot, but really, what am I? It's just words at the end of the day. I'm not really doing anything. I'm not really, I'm not changing the systems that are destroying my country. Um, you know, I'm being honest with myself here. I fit that bill where I fail. I'm a failure, because I'm not willing to fight the way you see other people fight. You see a lot of these black people who they think that they have a legitimate grievance, and they will fight. They will burn things down. They will rise up. Um, but that's just not white culture. It's just not what white people do. White people are pretty easygoing. That's why the whole narrative doesn't even make sense. If you know anything about white people, it just totally doesn't make sense, because white people are just too easygoing. Even the ones that are rebellious, they're rebellious against themselves than anyone else. Um, so yeah, it's kind of weird that so there's these three groups, none of which are actually in a position to do anything, and then they're ruled by a government that is comprised of some of mixture of those three groups. So you either get like in Canada we have Trudeau, and he would be I guess the Antifa side. He's more like the radical anti-white person who hates himself, hates his own culture, hates his own people, and will do everything to destroy those things, um, in order to help rise up anyone else that is not white. Um, and you get him making decisions that will basically undermine everything that made the country what it is. Uh, and I don't know what can be done. Like I see the fault in myself. Like I really do. Like this is me being critical of myself in a way when I'm making this video, that I really don't know what to do. I'm not sure. Like I don't think I have the fight in me, and I'm wondering why. Like why is that the case? I think our will has been broken. I really, it's almost like we should raise the white flag. Everything that that our ancestors fought for, we we aren't willing to protect. Now I'm willing to complain about it, and I'm willing to do work hard and be successful and all that kind of stuff. But am I willing to fight for my country? I'm not sure. I'm not really sure anymore. And I kind of say this with a great deal of sadness, because as a father, I want my children to be brought up in a country that resembles the country that I knew as a child, a country that valued freedom, a country that valued being good to each other, had strong community ties. I want that to be the norm. I want that to be the country that my children get to experience as well. And I'm not sure if they will experience that. So these are just, I know this is a bit of a rant. I know this is me being sort of self-reflected a bit. I kind of hope some of these ideas resonate with people. And I kind of want people to give me their feedback. What should we do? How can we save our countries? How can we defend those borders that are basically now open borders? How can we change our governments to make us, to have them listen to us? Because most people don't want this to happen. And unless we become vocal, unless we rise up, I don't think anything's going to change, because there's no incentive for the governments to change. There's no incentive for the people that are migrating here to change. They, they win because they have fight in them. And maybe ultimately, and I say this with a great deal of sadness, they deserve to win because they're willing to fight for what they want. And, if we're not willing to fight for our country, if we're not willing to fight for our values and our traditions and our system, then we maybe don't deserve to keep it. And that's why I was saying, like, land is only belongs to those who are willing to defend that land. So there is no such thing as stolen land. It's undefended land, I guess. That if you become weak, that land will be taken from you. And it doesn't matter if that's right or wrong. That's just reality. So this has been Socially Triggered. Check out my other videos. They're maybe a little bit more cheerful than this one. And yeah, just some thoughts that I was thinking about. Talk to you later.